serious hello scientists of Reddit. What's a scary science fact that the public knows nothing about? There is a gravitational anomaly in space called the Great Attractor, which is pulling everything within the Virgo and Hydra Centaurus superclusters towards it. It lies 150 to 250 million light years from the Milky Way, which itself is being pulled towards it too. The scary part is that relative to us, this anomaly lies within the same plane as our own galaxy, making it very difficult to observe. Essentially, we have almost no concrete idea of what it is. On the flip side of the Great Attractor is the Boggart's Void, which I find a bit creepy. The Boggart's Void, sometimes called the Great Void, is a huge, spherical region of space that contains very few galaxies. It's approximately 700 million light years from Earth, and located near the constellation Boggarts, which is how it got its name. The supervoid measures 250 million light years in diameter, representing approximately 0.27% of the diameter of the observable universe, which itself is a daunting 93 billion light years across. Its volume is estimated at 236,000 mcp3, making it the largest known void in the universe. At first, astronomers were only able to find 8 galaxies across the expanse, but further observations revealed a total of 60 galaxies. Now, while that might still seem like a lot, it would be like stumbling upon only 60 objects across a region larger than the continental United States, and that's just in 2 dimensions. According to astronomer Greg Aldering, the scale of the void is such that, if the Milky Way had been in the center of the Boggart's Void, we wouldn't have known there were other galaxies until the 1960s. Looking at the volume of the Boggart's Void, it should contain about 10,000 galaxies, when considering that the average distance between galaxies elsewhere in the universe is a few million light years. But the question is, why and how this void came to be? There hasn't been enough time since the universe began for mere gravitational forces to clear out a space of that size. There's a theory which suggests that supervoids are caused by the intermingling of smaller mini-voids, like soap bubbles coming together. But a more, maybe creepier, explanation is that the Boggart's Void could be the result of an expanding Kardashev 3 scale civilization. As the colonization bubble expands outward from its home system, the civilization dims each star, and subsequently each galaxy, it encounters by blanketing it in a Dyson shell. This might also explain why the void has such a nice, spherical shape. Oh, and we are seeing a snapshot of the void 700 million years ago. A lot could have happened in 700 million years that we just cannot see/know due to the inherent speed of light. Sweet dreams, everyone. If your dog swims in a lake after receiving a spot-on flea treatment, it absolutely decimates the invertebrate population. A large dog swimming in 8 Olympic swimming pools worth of water soon after treatment will leach enough neurotoxin to kill 50% of the lake's invertebrate population within 48 hours. There's some awareness of this, but it's not being taken seriously enough. Edit. I need to add, when I say after I mean relatively soon after, within say a day, to have an effect quite this devastating. The leaching does reduce over the month, but it's still there, and the effect of multiple dogs still allows for a terrible buildup of chemicals. Scientific literature conclusion on Alzheimer's disease and other neurodegenerative diseases in general is that the diseases start decades before the first obvious symptoms, and that we need to treat them at this stage. When you exhibit obvious symptoms, it's too late. Your brain is already mush. If you get diagnosed with Alzheimer's at 65, you had the disease since your early 40s at least, and you experienced very mild symptoms, but didn't notice it, and your brain fought like hell to compensate the deficit. When you get diagnosed, your brain is already very severely damaged and will never recover from the deficit. What are those early symptoms? Not really an early symptom, but something I noticed about my mom, who was diagnosed in her mid-40s with early onset Alzheimer's. One day in my late teens, my mom couldn't operate the 10-year-old oven she'd used every day for a decade, couldn't turn it on, couldn't adjust the heat. Just lost that bit of knowledge. She laughed it off as being tired, but that was my first early sign that something was wrong. Cancer geneticist here. Most cases of cancer that are sequenced generally just denote the prognosis, or how long a patient has to live, rather than treatment options. People always say let's cure cancer, however this simplifies cancer, as though it is only one disease. It's far more complicated than that. I studied at one of the largest cancer hospitals in the world, where the motto is to make cancer history, but the only obtainable goal is to make it chronic. We study and research as much as possible, but every cancer requires different research, and unfortunately the powers that be often prohibit funding and proficient research. It's work I'm passionate about, but also a broken system that is infuriating to work in. In 1958, a 7,600 pounds nuclear bomb was lost off the Georgia coast near Savannah. It's never been found. I've got 3 for you. 1. Rabies. Once symptomatic, rabies has a 100% asterisk fatality rate. The only options are the rabies vaccine and immunoglobulin therapy, which, again, must be administered before any symptoms. 2. Gamma ray bursts, henceforth referred to as GRBs. GRBs are a rare phenomenon emitted from the poles of rapidly spinning supernovae and hypernovae. In the event of a direct hit from suitably close, which is actually really far, all life on Earth would be wiped out. The facing side would be annihilated instantly, while the trailing side would quickly die due to the conditions on Earth no longer being suitable to support life. And there is absolutely nothing we can do about it. 3. Runaway global warming. There are many stores of greenhouse gases, namely carbon dioxide and methane, all over the place. But the conditions required to keep these gases trapped are delicate. The worst part? It may already be too late to stop, even if humanity immediately ceased all greenhouse gas emissions and put every single resource we have into carbon sequestration. In the UK, about 17% of people have fetal alcohol syndrome, Maguire et al., 1992. As much as 17% of us are developmentally disabled simply because, prior to the late 90s, a large proportion of British mothers drank during pregnancy, 41%. Thankfully the prevalence rate has been falling fast since the late 90s when all this research was published, but it's terrifying to see how much of an effect FAST is having on society. Small asteroids are hard to detect, but can still cause massive damage to towns. Some forms of anesthesia don't numb you to pain, they make you forget that you felt it. That reminds me that early anesthetic for children didn't actually stop pain and just paralyze them. The doctors just didn't believe the kids describing the pain, and it wasn't until a child of a doctor was able to recount in detail the medical procedure and how he was cut up and what caused the pain that they stopped using it. This is all from memory from a college neuroscience class, so I don't recall the specifics. The story I read involved patients from when Cura was first used as an anesthetic. It leaves your voluntary muscles paralyzed, but you're fully awake and aware the whole time. People would come around screaming, "I could feel everything." Nobody believed them until a doctor tried it himself. Spoiler, he too could feel everything. If I'd call it science per se, or call myself a scientist lol, but I'm a former funeral director, and one of the first things you learn in your actual funeral sciences classes is that people over a certain body fat percentage will start a literal grease fire in your crematory oven if you don't bake them at the proper temp and duration. Cold start, low and slow is key. Here's a few scary medical science facts regarding CPR that you won't often hear in your first aid/CPR class put on in school. I only learned this stuff after schooling to become an EMT. What's the success rate of CPR? The average person assumes 75% or greater. In reality, it's barely 10%. It's one of the first things they told us in training, because all new people have way too high of an expectation to the effectiveness of CPR. It can be very depressing when you're doing everything you were trained and aren't getting the results you think you should be getting. The time from collapse to administration of a shock read is absolutely paramount. They say the chances of survival drop 10% per minute. Oh, and rescue breaths. If you're not being very, and I mean very careful, you'll cause gastric dissension. You'll literally be blowing up their stomach, and they will vomit. Then there's the cracks and crackles. If done right it'll sound and feel like you're breaking every rib in little old lady Nelson's chest. You're likely not. It's cartilage and other bits shifting. Although, if you're a bit too vigorous, you may very well break a rib or two. But hey, they're already dead. So it doesn't matter. They'd rather be alive with a broken rib than dead.